Hello everyone, Rhubarb and Rue here, and welcome back to my channel. Today I will be telling 4 Irish folk tales for St. Patrick's Day. I myself do have some Irish ancestry from my mother and through her father. So with that in mind, let's get started. So the first story is about the Púca. The Púca, if you don't know, is a kind of shape-changing animal spirit. Often appears as a horse, a large black steed, but sometimes as an eagle or a hare even. It is known as a kind of trickster that likes to get people to get on its back to ride it, and then it rides off somewhere and dumps them in a thorn bush or carries them off on some other kind of adventure. Now, the Púca is a solitary fairy, and in much of Irish folklore there are 2 kinds of fairies, solitary and trooping. So, this Púca that we're going to be reading about, or rather I'm going to be reading and you're going to be listening, is associated with the start of November, so the day after Samhain, or All Hallows Eve, and specifically with this one hill in Ireland. Let's see. Yes, we read that out of a certain hill in Leinster, there used to emerge as far as his middle a plump, sleek, and terrible steed who would speak in a human voice to each person about November Day, and he was accustomed to give intelligent and proper answers to such as consulted him, concurring all that would befall them until November of the next year. And the people used to leave gifts and presents at the hill until the coming of Patrick and the holy clergy, that is, the arrival of Christianity. So, let us hear the tale of the Piper and the Púca, translated by Douglas Hyde. In the old times, there was a half-fool living in Dunmore, in the county Galway, and although he was excessively fond of music, he was unable to learn more than one tune, and that one tune was Black Rogue. He used to get a good deal of money from the gentlemen, for they used to come and get sport out of him. One night, the piper was coming home from a house where there had been a dance, and he was half drunk. When he came to a little bridge that was up by his mother's house, he squeezed the pipes on and began playing the Black Rogue. Then the Púca came up behind him, grabbed him and flung him up onto his own back. There were long horns on this Púca, and the piper got a good grip on them, and then he said, "Destruction on you, you nasty beast! Let me home. I have a 10-penny piece in my pocket for my mother, and she wants snuff." "Never mind your mother," said the Púca, "but keep your hold. If you fall, you will break your neck and your pipes." Then the Púca said to him, "Play for me Sean van Bocht." "I don't know it," said the piper. "Never mind whether you do or don't," said the Púca. "Play up, and I'll make sure you know." So the piper put wind in his bag, and he played such music as made himself wonder. "Upon my word, you're a fine music master," said the piper then, "but tell me where you're bringing me." "There's a great feast in the house of the Banshee, on top of the Croagh Patrick tonight," says the Púca. "And I'm for bringing you there to play music, and, take my word, you'll get the price of your trouble." "By my word, you'll save me a journey then," said the piper, "for Father William put a journey to Croagh Patrick on me because I stole the white gander from him last Martinmas." So the Púca rushed him across hills and bogs and rough places till he brought him to the top of Croagh Patrick. Then the Púca struck 3 blows with his foot, and a great door opened, and they passed in together into a fine room. The piper saw a golden table in the middle of the room, and hundreds of old women, or cailleacha, sitting around about it. The women rose up and said, "100,000 welcomes to you, Púca of November." Excuse me, cat. Sorry about that. The cat decided he wanted to listen to. No, that is my tea. Tea is not good for kitties. All right? Okay, cat, you can listen to the story too. Okay. So, 100,000 welcomes to you, Púca of Nasama. Who is this you have with you? That, of course, means the Púca of November. Why, the best piper in Ireland, says the Púca. So one of the old women struck a blow on the ground, and a door opened in the side of the wall. Cat. This is Sprite, by the way. Seems he wants to be part of the story tonight. Yes. Okay. Okay, so one of the old women struck, yes, and what should the piper see coming out of the wall but a white gander which he himself had stolen from Father William? By my conscience, then, says the piper, myself and my mother ate every taste of that gander, only one wing, and I gave that to Moira, or Red Mary, and it's she that told the priest I stole the gander. Okay, that's also not good for kitties to play with. There we go. There we go. Well, the gander cleared the table and carried it away, and the Púca said, play up music for these ladies. The piper played up, and the old women began dancing, and they were dancing till they were tired. Then the Púca said to pay the piper, and every old woman drew out a gold piece and gave it to him. By the tooth of Patrick, said he, I'm as rich as the son of a lord. Come with me, said the Púca, and I'll bring you home. They went out then, and just as he was going to ride on the Púca, the gander came up to him and gave him a new set of pipes. The Púca was not long until he brought him to Dunmore, and he threw the piper off at the little bridge where he'd grabbed him up and told him to go home, and says to him, you now have two things that you never had before. You have sense and music. The piper went home, and he knocked at his mother's door, saying, let me in, I'm rich as a lord, and I'm the best piper in Ireland. Ah, you're drunk, says his mother. No, indeed, said the piper, I haven't drunk a drop. The mother let him in, and he gave her the gold pieces, and said, wait now, says he, till you hear the music I'll play. So he buckled on his pipes, but instead of music, there came a sound as if all the geese and ganders in Ireland were screeching all together. He wakened the neighbors, and they were all mocking him, until he put on his old pipes, and then he played melodious music for them, and after that he told them that he'd gone all that he'd gone through that night. The next morning, when his mother went to look at all the gold pieces, there was nothing there but leaves, old dry leaves. So the piper went to the priest and told him his story, but the priest would not believe a word of it from him until he put the pipes on him, and then the screeching of geese began again. Leave my sight, you priest. Leave my sight, you thief, says the priest. But nothing would do the piper till he would put the old pipes on him to show the priest that his story was true. He buckled on those old pipes, and he played melodious music, and from that day till the day of his death, there was never a piper in the county Galway was as good as he was. So, I hope you liked that story. Here we see two things that are really common in the mythology, the folk tales and fairy tales of the British Isles. One, that the fair folk have an association not just with water, but with places under hills that can only be accessed by magical means or by someone who knows the trick for getting in. There's some thought that this might have to do with the old barrow tombs of the ancient kings and old families that used to live in those isles. But this is speculation, although there is some archaeology behind it. There's also another thing here you might have noticed, that fairy gold, when exposed to sunlight of the next morning after it's been given, turns to leaves or perhaps dust. So fairy gold is a trick. It looks like it's valuable, but in the end it's nothing but dry leaves. This comes up again in another story. This one also shows the connection between the fair folk, the fairies, and water and hills, and once again has the gold turning into leaves in the daylight. So this is a story of let me find it here. Too many stories. The Legend of O'Donoghue. The legend says that he was a chieftain who ruled over the country which surrounds the romantic Luchline, now called the Lake of Killarney. He had great wisdom, beneficence, and justice during his reign, and was said to have been as renowned for his warlike exploits as his peaceful virtues. And as proof that his domestic administration was not the less rigorous because it was mild, there was a rocky island in the lake which was pointed out to strangers called O'Donoghue's prison, in which his son, the prince, was once confined for some act of disorder or disobedience. And it is said that one day he held a great feast and gave many prophecies to his people. And then, in the middle of this story, of him telling these stories and prophecies, he got up and with a solemn, measured, and majestic tread strode into the lake. And when he got to the middle of it, he turned, looked at his people, waved to them, and disappeared. And people said that years afterward, when the first beams of the rising sun were just gilding the summit of Glenagh and Dinas, which are the hills nearby, that the waters near the eastern shore of the lake would become violently agitated, even though the rest of the lake was smooth as a mirror. And out of the hill and across the surface of the lake, O'Donoghue would walk, or ride mounted on a great steed, with all these fair maidens and youths following him after, singing and dancing with melodious music. And that any who saw them would be blessed and have great fortune, but only the chosen people who were pure of heart and good of nature would be able to see them. So, this is a story about someone who met Donoghue, or perhaps his spirit. So, one day, there was a man named Bill Duty, and he sat on a rock by Lake Killarney. "Oh, no, this is a wide world, but what will we do in it, or where will we go?" he muttered. "What will we do? Tomorrow is rent day, and Tim, the driver, swears that if we don't pay our rent, he'll have every halfpenny we have. And sure enough, there's Judy, my wife, and myself, and the poor children will be turned out to starve on the road, for never a halfpenny of rent have I. Oh, no, that I ever should live to see this day." Thus did Bill Duty bemoan his hard fate, pouring his sorrows into the reckless waves of this, the most beautiful of lakes. The cat is still listening. Anyway. And the lake seemed to mock his misery as the waves rejoiced beneath the cloudless sky of a May morning. That lake, glittering in sunshine, sprinkled with fair isles of rock and verdure, which means green growing plants, and bounded by giant hills of ever-varying hues, might, with its magic beauty, charm all sadness and despair. For alas, how ill the scene that offers rest, and heart that cannot rest agree. So, Bill Duty was not so desolate as he supposed. There was one listening to him that he had not known of, and help was at hand from a quarter he could not have expected. "Why, what's the matter with you, my poor man?" said a tall, portly-looking gentleman, at the same time stepping out of the firs. Now Bill was seated on a rock that commanded a large view of the field by the lake. Nothing in the field could be concealed from him except this patch of firs, which grew in a hollow near the margin of the lake. He was, therefore, not a little surprised at the gentleman's sudden appearance, and he began to question whether the person before him belonged to this world or not. He, however, soon mustered courage sufficient to tell him how his crops had failed, how some bad person had charmed away his butter, and how Tim the driver threatened to turn him out of the farm if he didn't pay up every penny of the rent that was owed by 12 o'clock the next day. The cat is having adventures. Anyway, "A sad story indeed," said the stranger. "But surely, if you represented the case to your landlord's agent, he wouldn't have the heart to turn you out. Now it should be noted that for this part of history, a lot of the land in Ireland was owned by English lords who lived in England far away, and they employed people called agents to keep track of the rent and collect it for them, and didn't care much about the people actually living on the land and farming it. So, Your Honor, where would an agent get a heart? Exclaimed Bill. I see Your Honor does not know him. Besides, he has an eye on the farm that for a long time for a fosterer of his own. In other words, he has someone, a new tenant, he wants to move in. So I expect no mercy at all, only to be turned out. Oh, take this, my poor fellow, take this, said the stranger, putting a purse full of gold into Bill's hat, which in his grief he had flung on the ground. Pay the fellow your rent, but I'll take care it should do him no good. I remember the time when things went otherwise in this country, when I would have hung up such a fellow in the twinkling of an eye. Now, these words were lost upon Bill, who was insensible to everything but the sight of the money, and before he could unfix his gaze, lift up his head to pour out his 100,000 thanks, the stranger was gone. The bewildered peasant looked around in search of his benefactor, and at last he thought he saw him riding on a white horse a long way off on the surface of the lake. "O'Donoghue! O'Donoghue!" shouted Bill. "The good, the blessed O'Donoghue!" And he ran capering like a madman home to show Judy, his wife, the gold, and to rejoice her heart with the prospect of wealth and happiness. The next day, Bill proceeded to the rent agent's, not sneakingly, with his hand on his head. Sorry. 1 second. My throat is a little dry. And of course, today I'm drinking Irish breakfast tea. Anyway. The next day, Bill proceeded to the agent, not sneakingly, with his hat in his hand, his eyes on the ground, and his knees bending under him, but bold and upright, like a man conscious of his independence and freedom. "Why don't you take off your hat, fellow? Don't you know you are speaking to a magistrate?" said the agent. "I know I'm not speaking to the king, sir," said Bill, "and I never take off my hat but to them I can respect and love. The eye that sees all knows I've no right either to respect or love you, landlord's agent." "You scoundrel," said the agent, and biting his lips with rage at such an unusual and unexpected opposition. "I'll teach you how to be insolent again. I have the power, remember." "To the cost of the country, I know you have," said Bill, who still remained with his head as firmly covered as if he was the Lord of Kingsale himself. "But come," said the magistrate, "have you got your money for me? This is rent day. If there's 1 penny of it wanting, or the running gale that's due, prepare to turn out before night, and you shall not retain another hour in possession." "There is your rent," said Bill, with an unmoved expression of tone and countenance. "You'd better count it, and give me a receipt in full for the running gale and all." The agent gave a look of amazement at the gold, for it was gold, real guineas, and not bits of dirty, ragged, small notes that are only fit to light one's pipe with. However willing the agent may have been to ruin Bill, as he thought, his unfortunate tenant, he still took up the gold and handed the receipt to Bill, who strutted off with it as proud as a cat of her whiskers. So, the agent... Cat, please do not climb into the couch again. I don't want to have to fetch you out. All right. Anyway, so the agent went to his desk shortly after and was confounded at beholding a heap of gingerbread cakes instead of the money he had deposited there, for the fairy gold turned to something else. He raved and swore, but all to no purpose. The gold had become gingerbread cakes, just marked and stamped like guineas, with the king's head, and Bill had the receipt in his pocket. So he saw there was no use in saying anything about the affair, as he would only get laughed at for his pains. And now he would have to pay the landlord the rent. Now from that hour Bill Duty grew rich. All his undertakings prospered, and he often blesses the day that he met with O'Donoghue, the great prince that lives down under the lake of Killarney. So, I hope you liked that story. And I feel that many people nowadays might also find it just as entertaining as the Irish people did telling it in days past. So here we see a story of a good person having good fortune. But there are also stories of the fairies, or the fair folk, or the gentry, or the good neighbors, whatever you care to call them, giving people who treat them badly a bad turn of fortune. So this next story is about perhaps the most famous of Ireland's fair folk, the leprechaun. Now, the leprechaun, if you don't know, is actually a cobbler. And I'll put a link in the description to a video. Cat. You're a destructive little beast sometimes, aren't you? Anyway, he is having fun tearing up one of his little cardboard toys. Sorry about that. So, this next story is about the leprechaun, and I'm going to put a link to a video from Monstrum in the description, which talks about the leprechaun, how he came to be, why he's so wealthy that he has a pot of gold, and how if you capture him, then you might demand his pot of gold from him before he lets you go. But not wanting to part with the money, which he earned quite fairly, he will do everything he can to trick you out of that money. So, like the Púca, the leprechaun is a solitary fairy. Now, in much of Irish folklore, fairies exist both as solitary fairies and trooping fairies. That is, fairies that have, they go around in groups. And they all have distinct peculiarities and callings and different ways. So, this is the story of one such leprechaun. And the story that I'm going to read was first told and transcribed by Lady Wilde. So, the leprechauns, or leithbrogan, meaning artisans of the brogue being a shoe, are merry, industrious, and tricksy little sprites who do all the shoemaker's work and the tailor's and the cobbler's for the fairy gentry, and are often seen at sunset under the hedge, singing and stitching. It is believed that a family now living near Castlerea came by their riches in a strange way, all through the good fortune from a friendly leprechaun, and the legend has been handed down through many generations as an established fact. So, there was a poor boy once, one of their forefathers, who used to drive his cart of turf daily back and forward and make what money he could by the sale of it. But he was a strange boy, very silent and moody, and the people said he was a fairy changeling. That is, a fairy child that was swapped for a human child, while the parents didn't notice. So, he joined in no sports, and he scarcely ever spoke to anyone, but spent the nights reading all of the old bits of books he picked up in his rambles. The one thing he longed for above all others was to become wealthy, and to be able to give up his old weary turf cart and live in peace and quiet all alone, with nothing but books round him, in a beautiful house and garden all by himself. That sounds like a pretty nice way to live. But anyway. Now, he had read in old books how the leprechauns knew all the secret places where gold lay hidden, and day by day he watched for sight of the little cobbler and listened for the click-click of his hammer as he sat under the hedge mending shoes. At last, one evening, just as the sun set, he saw a little fellow under a dock leaf, working away, dressed all in green, with a cocked hat on his head. So the boy jumped down from the cart and seized him by the collar. "Now, don't you stir from this," he cried, "till you tell me where to find the hidden gold." "Easy now," said the leprechaun. "Don't hurt me, and I will tell you all about it. But mind you, I could hurt you if I chose, for I do have the power. But I won't do it, for we are cousins once removed. So as we are near relations, I'll just be good instead, and show you the place where the secret gold is, that none can have or keep except those of fairy blood and race. Come along with me, then, to the old fort of Leprechaun, for there it lies. But make haste, for when the last red glow of the sun vanishes, the gold will disappear also, and you will never find it again." "Come off, then," said the boy, and he carried the leprechaun into the turf cart, and they drove off. And in a second they were at the old fort, and went in through a door the leprechaun made in the stone wall. "Now look round," said the leprechaun. And the boy saw the whole ground covered with gold pieces, and there were vessels of silver lying about in such plenty that all the riches of the world seemed gathered there. "Now, take what you want," said the leprechaun, "but hasten, for if that door shuts, you will never leave this place as long as you live." So the boy gathered up his in his arms, full of gold and silver, and flung them into the cart, and was on his way back for more when the door shut with a clap like thunder, and the place became dark as night. And he saw no more of the leprechaun, and had not even time to thank him. Though you should know, the lore says you should never thank one of the fair folk, because they see it as you trying to pay back a good turn with mere words, and will be quite insulted. So he thought it best to drive home at once with his treasure, and when he arrived and was all alone by himself, he counted his riches and all the bright yellow gold pieces, enough for a king's ransom. And he was very wise, and told no one, but went off next day to Dublin and put all his treasures into the bank, and found that he was now indeed as rich as a lord. That is good advice there for anyone. So he ordered a fine house to be built with a spacious garden, and he had servants and carriages and books to his heart's content. And he gathered all the wise men round him to give him the learning of a gentleman, and he became a great and powerful man in the country, where his memory is still held in high honor, and his descendants are living to this day, rich and prosperous. For their wealth has never decreased, though they have ever given largely to the poor, and are noted above all things for the friendly heart and the liberal hand. Liberal in this case meaning generous. So, good people, by magic, have good fortune. But the leprechaun can be bitterly malicious if it is offended, and one should be very cautious in dealing with them, and always treat them with great respect and civility, or they will take revenge and never reveal the secret of their hidden gold. One day a young lad was out in the fields at work, when he saw a little fellow, not even the height of his hand, mending shoes underneath a dock leaf. And he went over, never once taking his eyes off him for fear he would vanish away, and when he got quite close he made a grab at the creature, and lifted him up and put him in his pocket. Now tell me, excuse me. So he went and ran away home as fast as he could, and when he had the leprechaun safe in his house, he tied him by an iron chain to the hob. And, as many of you know, cold iron is one of the few things that can disrupt a fairy's power. Now tell me, he said, where am I to find the pot of gold? Let me know the place or I'll punish you. I know of no pot of gold, said the leprechaun, but let me go that I may finish mending the shoes. Then I'll make you tell me, said the lad. And with that he made a great fire, and put the little fellow on it, and scorched him. Oh, take me off, cried the leprechaun, and I'll tell you. Just there, under the dock leaf where you found me, there is a pot of gold. Go, dig and find. So the lad was delighted, and he ran to the door. But it so happened that his mother was just then coming in with a pail of fresh milk, and in his haste he knocked the pail out of her hand, and the milk was spilled all over the floor. Then when the mother saw the leprechaun, she grew very angry and beat him. Go away, you little wretch, she cried. You have overlooked the milk and brought bad luck, and she kicked him out of the house. But the lad, he ran off to find the dock leaf, though he came back very sorry in the evening, for he had dug and dug nearly down to the middle of the earth, but no pot of gold was to be seen. And this is also a good lesson, that if you hurt someone to get information from them, you can't trust what they say at all. So, the same night, the woman's husband was coming home from work, and as he passed the old fort, he heard voices and laughter, and one said, They are looking for a pot of gold, but they know little that a crock of gold is lying down at the bottom of the old quarry, hid under stones close by the garden wall. But whoever gets it must go of a dark night at 12 o'clock, and beware of bringing his wife with him. So the man hurried home and told his wife he would go that very night, for it was black dark, and she must stay at home and watch for him, and not stir from the house till he came back. Then he went out into the dark night alone. Now, thought the wife when he was gone, if I could only get to the quarry before him, I would have the pot of gold all to myself, while if he gets it, I shall have nothing. Obviously a troubled marriage. And with that, she went out and ran like the wind until she reached the quarry, and then she began to creep down very quietly in the black dark. But a great stone was in her path, and she stumbled over it, and fell down and down till she reached the bottom, and there she lay groaning, for her leg was broken by the fall. And just then, Her husband came to the edge of the quarry and began to descend, but when he heard the groans he was frightened. "Oh, cross of Christ about us," he exclaimed. "What is that down below? Is it evil or is it good?" "Oh, come down and help me," cried the woman. "It's your wife here, and my leg is broken, and I'll die if you don't help me." "And is this my pot of gold?" exclaimed the poor man. "Only my wife with a broken leg lying at the bottom of the quarry." And he was at his wits' end to know what to do, for the night was so dark he could not see his hand before his face. So he woke up his neighbor, and between them they dragged the poor woman up and carried her home, and laid her on her bed, half dead from fright, and it was many a day before she was able to get about as usual. Indeed, she limped all her life long, so the people said the curse of the leprechaun was upon her. But as to the pot of gold, from that day to this, not one of the family, father or son, or any belonging to them, ever set eyes on it. However, the little leprechaun still sits under the dock leaf of the hedge and laughs at them as he mends the shoes with his little hammer. Tick-tack, tick-tack. But they are afraid to touch him, for now they know that he can take his revenge. So, what did you think of that? Here we see people who mean good, having good things happen to them, and who follow advice, they come away with good fortune. And people who mean bad, they come away with bad fortune. So, one more story, I think, about the mysteries of magic in Irish folklore. So this one is called The Butter Mystery, and it is a story of enchanted butter. And as you may know, Irish butter is some of the best in the world, and so it can fetch quite a high price. And in this story, two brothers who have excellent butter, but peek too hard into the mysterious origins of it, come away wiser but poorer for the experience. So this is the story of the enchanted butter, also from Lady Wilde. Now, once there were two brothers who had a small farm and dairy between them. They were honest and industrious, and worked hard to get along, although they barely had enough, after all their labor, just to keep body and soul together. One day, while churning, the handle of the butter churn broke, and nothing being near to mend it, one of the brothers cut off a branch from an elder tree that grew close to the house, and tied it to the dash for a handle. Now, if you don't know, elder trees in folklore are often associated with the fair folk, and it can be not necessarily good or bad luck, but definitely some kind of luck to cut any part from the tree. So the churning went on, but to their surprise, the butter gathered so thick that all the crocks in the house were soon full, and still there was more butter in the churn. The same thing went on every day, so the brothers became rich, for they could fill the market with their butter, and still had more than enough for every buyer and themselves. At last, being honest and true men, they began to fear that there was witchcraft in it, that they were wronging their neighbors by doing something with their butter, and bringing it to their own churn in some strange way. So they both went off together to a great fairy doctor and told him the whole story, and asked his advice. "Oh, foolish men," said he, "why did you come to me? For now you have broken the spell, and you will never have your crocks filled with butter any more. Your good fortune has passed away, for now you know the truth. You were not wronging your neighbors. All was fair and just that you did, but this is how it happened. Long ago, the fairies passing through your land had a dispute and fought a great battle. And, having no weapons, they flung lumps of butter at each other, which got lodged in the branches of the elder tree in great quantities, for this was just after May Eve, when butter is aplenty. That is, when the ewes have a lot of rich and creamy milk for their lambs. This is the butter that you have had, and it came to you through the branch that you cut for the handle for your dash. But the spell is broken now that you have uttered the mystery, and you will have no more butter from the elder tree." Then the brothers went away quite sorrowful, and never after did the butter come beyond the usual quantity. However, they had already made so much money that they were content, and they stocked their farm, and all things prospered with them, for they had dealt uprightly in the matter, and the blessings of the eye that sees all was upon them. So, I hope you enjoyed these stories, and I hope that you have a good St. Patrick's Day. If you'll take a look in the description, as I said before, there is a link to learn more about the Leprechaun, and links to the 2 books that I have read from today, or at least citations for them. I'm not sure this one is still being published. I also would ask that you like, and if you like, subscribe so that I can continue telling stories. And I have a Ko-fi, which you can see on my channel and in the description for this video. And if you'd like to buy me a cup of tea, or perhaps commission me to tell a special story for you, just look there. I'm Rhubarb and Rue, and I'm hoping you have a wonderful day.